Hi, everyone, and welcome to another very special Talking Psalm episode. We have Stephen with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Daniel. Happy to be here.
Super glad you're here. And for those of you who don't know Stephen, you were my client in BedTyme a while back, actually. And since then,
It
you've
has
actually
been,
gone
yeah.
on to write a book that we'll talk about and much more. But we're here to talk about your story and again, much more. So again, welcome and feel free to just start wherever you'd like to start. The word is yours.
Well, thanks, Daniel. I appreciate that. Yeah, I owe a lot to you actually, because I suffered from insomnia for, oh God, I think it must have been 2 to 3 years. It felt like, I think it was at least that long. And that came after my diagnosis with cancer, with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 4. So it was pretty serious stuff. And I was a good sleeper before then. I was a natural sleeper. My wife used to marvel at my, putting a book up and reading it and falling asleep in about 5 seconds with the book, laying on my chest. So I was a good sleeper for many, many years, was a good sleeper. But chemo, uh, stress. I was working at the time full time at a very high pressure, high stress job, working with those with. I was a counselor for those with severe mental disabilities, and had been that for just about all of my adult life, working life. Um, I'm now retired, but at that time I was still working full time. I was working for the California Department of Rehabilitation. It was a pretty intense job. Worked with some people who had pretty severe disabilities. So the stress levels were high, anxiety was high, but the chemo really played havoc with me. And they were wanting me. The job was coming, wanting me. I was on sort of a leave, to get cancer treatment, and then they wanted me to come back and work full time. That produced a lot of stress in me. I didn't feel capable of doing that, but they were insisting on that. And so that upped the anxiety levels. Um, and so it started to affect my sleep. And this was not long after the big fire that we had down here. This was when I was living in Northern California at the time. So again, stress from all different levels coming at me. And so my sleep was affected. I wound up trying to sleep in the chair in the living room, and that was really uncomfortable and difficult. Um, so eventually, I lapsed into a period of insomnia, and that was probably much harder than the cancer that I went through. To be honest with you, the cancer treatment. Caused its difficulty. I lost all that hair on my body, which is why I grew this beard. I just wanted to have some hair, on my body, and a little even more than I had before. uh, and it also produced heart failure, which was very difficult. That is, the chemo did that, but the chemo saved my life, so I can't complain that much, about this. It really did save my life, and I have to thank my oncologist and my nurses. They were wonderful in terms of my treatment. Um, Blessings to nurses everywhere, by the way. They're great people. So the sleep got increasingly bad as the time came where I had to go back to work. And then I did go back to work, and I was taking medication at that time, benzodiazepines and other medications for the insomnia. I was seeing a psychiatrist, and they were also good, but the only tool they really had was the medication, and I got good and hooked on that benzo. I'll tell you, it was
Let me
tough.
just jump in
Yeah,
real quick,
go ahead.
Stephen, and ask you.
Yeah.
There was all this stress. You'd been diagnosed with cancer, going to chemo. You were going to start working, and you start having trouble sleeping. What was that like? Meaning, was it that you would spend like a whole night awake, or was it more like you had a very fragmented and choppy sleep, or what was it like?
Yeah, I couldn't fall asleep. Okay, so that was really frustrating. My mind was too busy. It was too, wired up, and for many reasons, the medically and psychologically as well, because of the anxiety. So I couldn't easily fall asleep. Going into bed was, the bed felt kind of dangerous to me. I was having a lot of side effects during the day with from the medication and from the lack of sleep, but particularly the medication was causing me. Uh, I was just really wired. I couldn't nap at all, and then at work, my performance I think really dropped off. I was becoming more disabled mentally than my clients. Okay, I went to my supervisor and said, I'm as much disabled as my clients. And so it was very difficult to be at work. And so, yes, I could not fall asleep. And then if I did fall asleep, which was rare, I would get up in the middle of the night, say 1, 2 o'clock, and I couldn't get back to sleep. Okay. So that just added to my suffering. I mean, I got to the point, Daniel, where, say 6 months, 8 months down the road from this, I was suicidal. I have to say, I had thought about suicide. I was hopeless. I felt hopeless, that this was not going to get better, that I had no way out. And I even prepared. I mean, I found a climbing rope that I had in the garage, and I looked at where I could hang it, and I brought this up with my therapist. I was in counseling at the time, and she was alarmed, and she really said to me, "Listen, I want you to go home tonight and cut up that rope, and then call me and tell me that you did that." Well, I thought about that, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to cut up the rope because that was sort of my out, you know. But I went home and I did think about it and did, consider it. I'm a long time Zen and Taoist student. So in Zen, in Buddhist practice, you use, in a sense, suffering is not a bad thing. You use it to kind of go to the next level if you can get through it. And so part of Zen practice is to get through tough times. And I said to myself, well, I'm going to use Zen in that way, and I'm going to cut up this rope. She's right. And I didn't say any of this to my wife, by the way. She knew nothing about my plans. Um, but she saw that I was suffering a lot, from lack of sleep, of course. And she's been so supportive. It's been great to have her with me during this time. And so I cut up the rope, and I called the counselor and told her I did that. And that didn't solve my problems by any chance. But it gave me, at least, it kept me alive. It kept me alive, and that was the key, really. And then from there, I sort of, at that point, I hit the dark night of the soul, and I was at my lowest point, because I had no, there was no out. I was not going to. I think Camus said that your one big question in life is whether to commit suicide or not. And I did, and it said if you don't commit suicide, then you have to start taking responsibility for your life. And I think at that point, that was a real turning point for me. And I did start to, you know, I think I may have even started with your app at that point, with the BedTyme app. I was looking for anything and everything as a way out. I would even call at 2 in the morning. I'd call the Christian 24-hour hotline for support, and I'm not even Christian. Okay, so but they were quite helpful. They were very nice, and you actually spoke to a live person, which was kind of good at 2 in the morning. At least you got to speak to somebody directly. But I tried everything, Daniel. All the sleep hygiene, and I would look through YouTube for anything and everything. One guy even got into sleep deprivation. I was willing to give that a try, and but I saw how dangerous that was, so I didn't I didn't pursue it. But medication, the doctors tried different kinds of combinations with me. Um, and again, the side effects were not good. And a lot of times the medication did not even help me get to sleep because you had to time them just right in terms of when to take it. Was it 2 hours before bed? Was it a half hour? Was it some this, to that, this, that, or the other? And it was very confusing. And some nights they didn't help at all. And that got me really frustrated. So, and of course, I was getting addicted to the benzodiazepine that I was taking. I think it was Ativan. And so again, I called the nurse, connected with the psychiatrist, and was able to speak with her. She was quite helpful, and ultimately told me how to titrate myself down from the benzo. That addiction, I got to actually empathize with my clients who were also often very addicted to benzos, during their treatment. And so I got to be empathetic towards them, knowing what they're going through in terms of addiction. It's very difficult to get off of a benzodiazepine addiction. And so, but through titration, which is the lowering it very gradually each week, by very very small incremental amounts, um, I was eventually able to get over that addiction and get off of the medication. And I vowed not to use medication again unless I needed it for extremely emergency reasons. If I had to take it up from time to time on an as needed basis. But they're very, they work very well, and that's the problem with meds, is that in my case they worked, it was like too well, so you wanted to take it every day. And my psychiatrist had warned me, but I didn't heed his warnings, and so I started taking it. I was taking it every day. But then again, through this titration method, I was able to get off of it, thank God. It was very difficult. That withdrawal period is one of the hardest things I've ever been through. Um, and so I was determined, not to use meds again for the insomnia. And then I think I started working with you at that point, and looking at my relationship to the insomnia. And I imagine other people have gone through this. It sort of takes over your life. I was everything. Every time I talked to my friends, my relatives, it was always about my insomnia. It was always about my suffering, and what I can't sleep, and I can't do this, and my life is, I can't make plans with anybody, because if I made plans like 2, 3 days in advance, on the day of the plan, I might have had a horrible night sleeping, and I couldn't go through with the plan. So my social life was gone. It was completely, and with my wife as well, because we couldn't make plans either. I didn't know. It had to be a very here and now kind of thing. Wake up, and I was feeling, decent enough that day. Then we could go out and into nature or something like that, some kind of, outing. Um, so, working with you, I began to take a look at my obsession, literal obsession with insomnia. And I know others go through this, and it does take over your life, and you lose control in a way. You're beholden to the insomnia. It's really not a pleasant relationship to have with anybody, including even people. You don't want that, or your work or something like that. But insomnia, particularly, it's insidious, and it's one of the hardest ailments to deal with, I think. So, I don't know if you want me to go on further in terms of how I got over it, but that's kind of a general thumbnail sketch about how I got to be an insomniac.
Wow, yeah, you're very, very great storyteller. So I think, definitely that's where we're going next, to talk about how things started to change. And I just had
Right.
maybe one question, and then something I just want to bring up. But the question is just, how did you find BedTyme? How did you find the app?
Well, that's a good question. I have to go back in memory about how I did find you. Of course, I was looking for anything and everything to help me. especially after I cut the rope up. You know, I was like, anything. So I think I basically stumbled upon your app. Looking for any kind of sleep app that I could find. I mean, I worked with God. I worked with a hypnotherapist in England at one point over the phone. Okay, I worked with a guy I was living in Northern Cal at that time. I was working with a guy in Portland who was a sleep uh, coach, I guess you'd say. And I'm paying people for these things too. I mean, they weren't cheap. And so apps, there were different apps that went to. I was listening to tapes, before getting into bed. Um, Hypnosis tapes that kind of calm my mind down, along with my meditation efforts, which were not all that helpful because again, I was so focused on insomnia and on my sleep problems, and more and more dreading to get into bed. I mean, it was like that. That was the tough. As I say, I had been a really natural sleeper before, but then dreading now getting into bed, and that was different for me. And that was something I had to work on. So I think I found your app that way and started to use it, and I think that's kind of that cognitive behavioral therapy approach, in a sense. I don't know if it's completely that, but that was appealing to me, and it began to give me a sense of control as I went
Which is
through the various.
let's
Yeah,
pause there for a second. I think this is actually of course where we really want to hear about how things started to change and the insights you had, etc. But just one quick thing before we do is so a lot of my guests here, they say just like you did that um I tried everything, and often
yes,
name a couple of things. But then you actually wrote a book that we'll talk more about later. It's called Beating Insomnia by Stephen Altschuler.
yes,
And in the book, when I got it, what struck me was this chapter. It's chapter 2, where you describe everything you tried. And I've never seen
yeah,
anyone write it down. And I'm just going to read, just briefly read it for the audience because it's
yeah.
striking. It's like CBD oil, marijuana, looking into adrenal fatigue, aromatherapy, golden milk with superior, tapping therapy, banana peel, prescription sleeping aids, over-the-counter aids, CBT-I, weighted blankets, CPAP machine, herbal supplements, Epsom salt baths, sleep mattress pillow, keeping a diary, changing your pillow, homeopathy, adult coloring books. I'm not even going to finish it. I'm actually not even halfway through. And
Everyone,
it was just striking to me like, oh my goodness, this is
yes.
this is a lot.
Coloring books. Okay, I bought coloring books, right, to work on before bedtime. Anything and everything. CBD, which is not well researched, and so you don't know what dosage you take. I even saw an MD who was a CBD specialist. He got me on something, but they didn't work as I should say it didn't work consistently. Um, so it does work for some people, and I got to say it could be helpful. But everything, Daniel, I didn't. There wasn't anything I didn't try. And so I think again the app was something. I went to my HMO and worked with a sleep therapist there. They had me do the sleep apnea test where they hooked me up. I could show you. We had time. I'd show you a picture on my iPhone of me all hooked up and wired, for this sleep apnea test, right? And they found I did have a mild form of sleep apnea, and they put me on the CPAP machine. Okay, so I did that too.
Yeah.
If anybody that out there is listening and use CPAP machines, it ain't easy to use a CPAP machine. It's noisy and it's cumbersome, and it's got uh, uh, things hooked up to your nose and mouth and whatnot, and you have to breathe properly. Oh my goodness. I could, yeah. And then I discovered that like the CPAP machine is probably great for apnea, and I think it is. It's been shown to be really good for sleep apnea, but for insomnia, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. And I said to the doctor there, I said, "Listen, my first priority is getting rid of the insomnia. Then I'll deal with the sleep apnea." So I stopped using the machine because it was getting in the way of my, my battle with insomnia. So so then the app was not only the app, but then my contact with you as well began to show me that I could have some control over, well, when I would get into bed, getting the timing right, using the sleep hygiene methods that were appropriate to me. And it changed my relationship, to insomnia. And that's when I think things started to improve for me. Yeah.
So glad so glad you found it. And one question I had that just popped up in my brain was like, as you downloaded the app and started like looking at the content, what was it clear to you from the beginning that, aha, this is different, or did it start off like, oh, it's just another thing, or when did it start feeling like, oh, this is different?
Yeah. Um, Well, it was still, using the sleep diary and that kind of visual. It made it seem like that was similar to what I had been seeing before. Um, I'm trying to think. I mean, ironically, at that time, you had not. It was promising there was going to be a sleep coach, but for some reason, the sleep coach didn't materialize, and you became my sleep coach. And so we had, and that's what was really different. And I don't know if this is still the case, but with other people, but that really made it with you directing me and giving me advice through email. That was really the key right there. So it was ironic because I think it was just a glitch in the app at that time. I think you had just started the app at that time, and it was a glitch because you couldn't provide a sleep coach, so you took that role, and that's what made it really different. I think the basic sleep diary, monitoring your sleep, and doing the some of the technical stuff around how much sleep do you need, what time are you going to get up in the morning? That was similar, sort of cognitive behavioral kinds of things. But I think the key was my connection with you through the email, and then could then, because that I had the I had the ability at that time to kind of test out some of the things, the sleep hygiene stuff, and see what was good, what was right for me, what was working for me. Do I read in bed, or do I read outside of bed? Do I different kinds of things? Putting up a blackout curtain in my room, and I mean, I tossed and turned so much. My wife had to move to the living room to sleep, and she just kept getting awake, and so we had to make adjustments around that. I was just tossing and turning all night, and it was just too much for her, and of course it was a lot for me too. So, but yeah, I think that I began to kind of fine tune sleep hygiene and fine tune what was going on here, my relationship. I mean, I have a master's in counseling. As I say, worked for 40, almost 40 years, working with people with mental disabilities, and found out, my mental relationship to insomnia was dysfunctional, and I had to take a look at that. And I think you helped me with that in terms of um, really looking at. Well, I think that some of the things about when to get into bed. One of the keys for me, and I'll move into this area of how I got out of it, insomnia, was not getting into bed until I was sleepy enough to get into bed. That was key. So it wasn't a matter of what time I was going to get into bed. I decided that that I was getting into bed too early. I was before the app. I was still taking some medication, and again there was that instruction of well, the medication doesn't start until if you take it, say, an hour before you get into bed. So then I was sort of geared to the time of getting into bed. But then I changed that to, and I think you had suggested this, is to not get into bed until I was sleepy. And okay, that's not an easy thing to determine. Just to let people know, because there's a part of you that says, "Oh, well, I better get into bed because I got to get my 8 hours. I got to get my 8 hours, 7 or 8 hours." And so, no, I don't. Whether I'm sleepy or not, I've got to get into bed. No, that doesn't work. That really doesn't work. And so for me, anyway, it might work for others, but for me, I had to. So I would go over to a chair. I have my desk is in the bedroom. I'd go over to a chair by my desk and I'd read. I would read something. I explained this in the book. You have to figure out what to read, because it's not. You got to read something that's kind of interesting, but also kind of boring. Um, so I started reading, something of coming from a 19th century author. Well, Thoreau was a good example. He was interesting but boring because of the language that he used. So but that would put me to sleep eventually. It wasn't so interesting that my mind was, more stirred up. So the idea of this would be to calm my mind down, okay? Because anxiety and stress and worry is the antithesis of sleep. I think that's what really gets in the way of sleep. It's a mental thing. And I had, since the cancer, I had lots of things on my mind, believe me. Medical, financial. I won't get into that but obviously financial, social, lots of anxiety, lots of stress. These are things that you need to, in tackling insomnia, you need to somehow calm these things down, at least to the point where you can get into bed, where you can get tired, you can get sleepy. And this is what a book like that can do. But that's not the only answer, because again, you have to kind of go through each of your stresses, each of your anxieties, each of your worries, and deal with them and try to lessen them, try to solve them in some way that will begin to calm your mind. Straight meditation doesn't quite do it, because it's just very, in the moment. If you still have a worry after you stop meditating, the worry is still going to be there, at least from my perspective. And so I did. I went through, I wound up retiring as a result of solving my financial difficulties. I was able to get medical care because of my disability. They gave me a disability retirement, which was a real gift. And so that one by one, I started to go through, and it's amazing. I suffered with anxiety even when I was a young man. I won't go into that in detail, but I've been struggling with anxiety for many years. Since I have conquered insomnia, I have not had one moment of anxiety. My anxiety is just not there. Now, I know people will say, "Oh, but you're retired." Well, yeah, that's true. Work was a source of anxiety for me, and so I decided, okay, I left work early, premature. It was not a great pension that I received, but I left work early, partly to lessen my anxiety, and it did. So if you're in a job that's very stressful, well, if you're young, you could change jobs. I did a number of times. a number of times that I changed jobs over my career. And sometimes the job was just too stressful, and I decided I'm out of here. I got to leave. I went and lived in a cabin for 4 years in New Hampshire when I was 33 years old, partly to heal from some of that anxiety, during my 20s. And I've written a book about that too, by the way, and I'm working on another book going deeper into that experience of living in the cabin alone for 4 years in New Hampshire. The winters were tough, but I loved it. It was great. Lived my Thoreau kind of life, even more so than Thoreau, I should say. So, so I had a lot of anxiety in my life, and worked in a field that, I had to be quite present, and I'm dealing with other people with anxiety. Well, so I managed to get to the point where, again, one by one, my worries were left. We moved from Northern California to Southern Washington as a result of finances. It was cheaper up here. One of the reasons, and some beautiful nature, which for me, I have to spend a lot of time in nature to balance out. That's important for me. I've written books about nature. As again, the 4 years in the woods was a seminal event for me, and so that's important for me. And now living in a kind of a suburban, city, I still know where to find my sources of nature, and that's very important for my rehabilitation and my continued recovery. So once you have began to reduce your stress and anxiety, then you by reading before you get into bed, or whatever activity can calm your mind down. It can be other things too. Although I did try crossword puzzles, that's not a good idea, but actually, because it does stir up your mind a lot. You want things to calm your mind down. And so again, be careful with the kind of, you don't want to read a dramatic novel or something like that that's keeps you on the edge of your seat. And you don't want to read something extremely interesting, because that keeps your mind active. You get, again, something that and this may need some experimenting in terms of which books to pick up, but you just to be careful about what you choose to read and what you choose to watch on TV before you're going to sleep. That can stir you up. I stopped watching the news before bedtime. Stopped looking at news apps. That kind of thing. Stopped looking at email, because that can be stirring you up sometimes. So again, this friend of mine calls it conscious consumption. Conscious consumption. And I think that's really a good term, because it's not just food. You're not just consuming food, you're consuming information. You're consuming, the weather, or whatever it is, it's coming into your senses. You're consuming that, and to do it consciously, you can not let it affect you so much. So you can choose when to stop bringing in, watching the gory detective show before bedtime, which we did for a while. So we did kind of experiment, and we found, oh my God, you're still thinking of the blood and gore and the drama of the detective show. That's not going to make you sleepy. That's just going to stir you up.
I think
So
yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'll just jump in real quick, Stephen, and say that I'm so glad, of course, that things got easier, and that anxiety too, like that just faded. That's amazing. And just to contextualize for our viewers here, that I totally agree that this idea about like conscious consumption makes total sense to me. I think on one hand, the one thing that can be tricky is when some people are like, as like some people are like, oh, I'm gonna read this super boring book, so I become really tired and I sleep. Like that can be like a trick, like it's like another sleep effort. On the flip side, if I'm worried about my finance or something like that, I wouldn't go like look at my bank account right before I go to bed. So it makes sense to find something that is interesting enough to kind of take your attention there, but not
Yeah.
like, creating unnecessary stress for ourselves, right?
Exactly, exactly. You have to find that balance point. And the other big thing, of course, is to begin to change my relationship to the bed, and also to the next day, because with insomnia, I dreaded the next day. I think I saw seeing one of your participants in this program. I was checking it out the other day, and she would be terrified about being anxious the next day, because of what she was anticipating, anticipatory anxiety, essentially. And I got into that very much so, uh, dreading getting up, because I had really, what did I have to look forward to? Well, another day of fatigue, another day of not having any energy to do anything. That was horrible. I'm a person who has a lot of interests, between photography and being in nature and golf. And I've written several books about conscious golf, actually. So I'm an outdoor person. I used to backpack up in the high Sierras before I got cancer. So that's important to me. I had something to look forward to, and also my work. I was helping people for years. I was a professional helper, and that was very satisfying to me. Even though it's a difficult job and a stressful job, it was very, very satisfying to be helpful to others, and it still is today.
And
Um,
what would you say, like, what was helpful in making that switch from looking at the day as something you were dreading to like
yes.
actually like, looking forward to
Well,
it again?
yes, I had something. I had something to wake up to be excited about. Okay, that was one of the big keys that you gave me, Daniel, and I thank you so much for that. To change your focus from to change my focus from the insomnia and the worry to be looking forward to something, to be excited about something to wake up to. Okay, in my case, it was writing, and I had always been a writer in my adult life, and so I was able to then focus even more on writing, and writing things that were helpful. Um, and so that really that was one of the keys right there, was to be, when I got into bed, I would not be thinking, dreading, the uh, insomnia, but I'd be looking forward to what I was going to do when I woke up. Okay, so that was key to my recovery from insomnia, um, because then I wasn't. It changed my whole focus, my whole attitude, my whole relationship to sleep, essentially. And my, as again, I was a natural sleeper before all this, so I was thinking, this is a way to get back to that, to get back to natural sleep. So I eventually started to eliminate even things like certain parts of sleep hygiene, and and I began to kind of narrow it down in terms of what did I really need to have a good night's sleep. And I use I mean, I still get up in the middle of the night. Okay, still do, but I don't worry about it. I don't worry about it, because I know that if I get up, and I do get up and out of bed, oftentimes I go pee. That's a sort of a ritual, and then I go to my chair, and I pick up my book, and I use uh, this sort of an incandescent light bulb. So that's I'm not using digital stuff when I read. I'm not going to Kindle, because that's supposed to be. I don't know if that's true or not, whether that's supposed to be bad for you or what. But I just decided, yeah, I don't want to do that. I'd rather read a book anyway. Um, I write books, so I'd rather read a book, and then just read until I get sleepy again. And um, since a lot of my other worries have decreased, I'm able to. The book is having more of an impact on me, in terms of sleepiness. And now how do I determine if I'm sleepy enough? Okay, that's a tough one. Well, do I start yawning? Do I start like having to go back what I just read because I just forgot what I just read, or maybe my mind starts going into a daydream? Yes, that's the point that I'm sleepy, because I'm kind of dozing off in a way. And so I then and that takes maybe about, I'd say on average, maybe about a half hour with the book but if I get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's okay. I still have, I do get up, by the way. I set my alarm for 6 every day, 365 days a year. Okay, including vacations, anything. I set my alarm for 6 o'clock. And I get out of bed at 6 o'clock, although I may get back in bed to relax a little bit. Anyway, I stretch it a little bit. And I know I'm probably not supposed to get back in bed, but I do. But I'm awake. I'm awake at 6 o'clock. So I know that if I get up at 2, and I do check my clock, by the way, so that's a difference also. I think you got to know what you're dealing with sometimes when you wake up in the middle of the night. Because if I wake up at 2, then I know that I can read for a half hour or whatever, and I can get back to sleep and have a decent sleep for the rest of the night. But if I get up at 4, I don't usually go to my chair and read. I'll try to calm the mind. I use a Zen koan, by the way. That's a kind of a Zen mantra that I picked up, that I got from a very powerful Zen teacher that I studied with years ago. I still use that koan. That helps me calm my mind down. So at 4 o'clock, I'll get back into bed. Okay, after I go pee, and it usually works. It usually works. If it doesn't, well, my one counselor told me rest is second best. So even if I just are laying in bed resting, I'm okay. I'm okay. And I'm okay because also I'm not worried about the next day. Okay. I'm still going to get up and do my purpose. Okay. What's my purpose in life? What's my life goal? What's my passion? I'm still going to get up and do my passion now that I can, because I've replaced insomnia with my passion. And that's really
Yeah.
the way a human being should live one's life, is to be passionate about something, about being interested in things that you like to do, have hobbies. You don't have to be a brain surgeon. I'm not, you don't have to be somebody famous to do something that you believe in, that you are passionate about, that you're interested in. And anybody can do that, can get up and help others, volunteer maybe, or have learn how to play the guitar, or knit something for your grandchild. I don't know. There's all sorts of
Yes,
things you can do,
there
to
are.
be interested in life, and get up for something that you're interested in doing. And so, and I don't really care whether I have 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. I don't care. What I care about is how I feel the next day, throughout the next day. Well, I'm 77 years old. I've got energy you can't believe. Nothing stops me. I'll get out I'll walk every day, aerobically, and I'll write my books, and I'll read, and I'll watch my golf, and I'll play golf. I'm still playing golf at 77. Now I've made some modifications. I'm not walking as much anymore. I'm going into the electric carts, but occasionally I'll walk 9 holes. And I'm actually getting better at golf, which is a real pleasure for me. So it's a pleasure. Why do I play?
Yes.
My wife doesn't play. I mean, she hardly knows anything about golf. Uh, but she's very happy that I'm playing and enjoying myself with golf. But also, I go out and I talk to the squirrels, or I talk to the crows. They begin to know me. Actually, I work play the same places every day. That's fun to me. Watch the ducks at our swimming. We have a swimming pool in our complex, and these ducks come and sit by the pool in the wintertime. And so I get such a kick out of that. And so there's things that really pleasure me in that way, you know.
That's
At 77, you got to make some changes. Yeah, you know, I got to say, I can't climb the mountains like I used to. In fact, I've given away. Uh, Actually, so we had a robbery not too long ago from our garage, and somebody stole all my camping equipment. Was I that upset? No, I was going to give it away anyway because I can't camp. I can't, you know, backpack like I used to, but I can still walk trails and go to waterfalls and, you know, and go to national parks here in the Pacific Northwest. Can still do all of that,
it's
and
amazing.
but just a little bit less than with my heart failure. I've got to watch out. I can't overdo it. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I've got to modify. I have energy. Okay. Well, I did not have energy when I was insomnia. I was going through insomnia. I did not have energy. I didn't want to do anything. I just
Yeah.
lay around all day and do nothing and be exhausted and be sad and depressed. And I did take the antidepressants. Did they help? No, I don't. Maybe a little bit. They probably did. They weren't so addictive, so they were you know they had a better effect for my depression. But I really got into a depression around when I was insomnia, um, and so that begins to change, and not drastically change, but it begins to change over time. Why? Because you begin to have more control over your life, essentially. And I think all of us human beings, but you know, do need to that because we feel robbed. Look, even the ill people that I worked with, they didn't like taking their medications, but they knew they had to. But they had to give up some control around it. Anyway, I had more control. You know, I've broken the addiction to the benzos, and I had beaten. I mean, it's not a great word, beaten. Yeah, I had conquered. I had maybe overcome. Let's say maybe I should have changed the name of the book, but I had overcome insomnia, and I felt good about that. I felt really proud, and I got back to natural sleep. I don't
Yeah.
take CBD. I don't take anything. I don't even take any herbal stuff. I don't black out my window anymore. Okay, we did move to another apartment because the people upstairs were making too much noise. That bothered me. I'm very noise oriented, you know, sound oriented. So we actually took the offensive and proactively changed apartments. Cost us some bucks, but and some effort, but we did it. And in
Yeah.
the same complex, and we're very happy by that. We had no one above us, so that took care of the noise, the creaking ceilings, and the noise after 10 o'clock. That took care of that. We have wonderful neighbors below us. And so, you know, sometimes you have to be proactive. You can't just be passive in life. You have to say, we moved up here because we were, you know, at our age. We moved because we wanted to have a better life, a better life. And we did. We did. It worked out.
That's amazing. And you know, I guess two things before we conclude here is firstly, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Well, that's an interesting question. I have contemplated kind of becoming a sleep coach, but I'm enjoying retirement so much that you know I don't really want to do I don't want to work too much work. Instead, my work is my writing. So I've been doing, you know, I still write books. I wrote 5 books over the pandemic, 5 books, and I've developed formed my own publishing company during the pandemic. And so I'm publishing my own books, which I now have control over. And
And so I think
so I love to write. Well, they can
people
write.
can probably
They
just
can email. Well, I could
yeah,
say they
I
can.
get I guess they can just Google your name and they'll find your website, I think.
That's right. I have a website, stephenaltshuler.com, that advertises my books, and I think it might give my. I'm not sure if it gives my email. I can give you my email over this broadcast if you'd like. I don't mind email. I just don't want people calling me at 2 in the morning, you know.
Of course. Yeah, we'll either put it in the we'll put that in the description or somewhere so people can, because I'm sure
Oh,
people will have
good,
questions.
good.
It'd be
Yeah,
nice.
that
And
'cause an email is fine. I don't mind that at all. And I like to be of help in that way, and I have done that with people that I've known in terms of helping them with their sleep problems. And at some point, I might go to sleep coaching. I don't know. It's something I've thought about because
yeah,
again, I'm a helper. I
yeah,
have a master's in counseling. I did that for about 40 years, helping others, and you don't stop helping once you're a helper. You know, as you know, being a helper yourself. So
very, very true.
yeah, but my books, the book on insomnia, I think can be very helpful. If you're struggling, and I think that's one way to go. I've written my book that I've just published recently is called To Live a Life, and it's 200 ways to be a better person. Essentially, it's called To Live a Life, and I would recommend that book as well. Um, I think it could be helpful, and I'm starting to do some workshops in the community that I live in via a bookstore where I'm beginning to do some talks and some workshops there.
That's
So I may
nice.
do more of that
Yeah.
as time goes along. But I'm enjoying retirement. I'm enjoying living here in the Northwest. Uh, we're liking it very much, and so and being anxiety free. I think that's just really, oh God, you can't imagine
That's
how
incredible.
oh yeah, just how
And
relieving that is.
I was when I do these interviews, I'm always kind of on the lookout for something like a phrase or an expression or something people said that I can put like as a title. And I know
Yeah.
exactly what I'm going to put as a title for this, because you said I've replaced insomnia with my passion. I love that. So
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. And I think, I think the other point that comes to mind is you have to, if you're afraid of something, and this is where cognitive behavioral therapy comes in. And I've studied CBT and I've done it with others. Um,
I think,
you
sorry,
have to
Stephen,
face
to
the fear.
interrupt.
You have to face the fear.
Yeah,
You have to
that's
face
what
the fear.
I,
You can't.
I
The more you run away from it, the more you turn away. The more you try to. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. No, it's going to get stronger. Fear
yes,
fear feeds on that. So you have to face it. And I think
yeah,
that's true with anxiety. And I have a whole chapter in the book about how to deal with anxiety, and just that, because I think when I began to do that at work, work became much more satisfying and much less anxiety producing when I was able to face the fact that I was nervous. I mean, really anxious going into a meeting, for example.
Spe-
Going to do
Speaking
meeting
of
of
which,
a
I have
client.
sorry, Stephen, I have this meeting in literally 4 minutes, so I just have to
Oh,
wrap up
sorry.
here. But
Okay.
not at all. It was super nice having you. Thanks so much for being here,
Oh,
and
thank you,
we'll lose
Daniel.
touch. Okay,
I appreciate your work, and I hope we stay in touch.
we will. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Thanks.